He hit me across the face, his palm cracking against my cheek with a sound so sharp it seemed to silence the entire world. But what made the room go still wasn't the blow. It was what I did next. I smiled, not out of madness, not out of fear, but because in that instant, I knew everything had changed. You see, people don't expect the woman they've pushed for decades, the mother they've overlooked, the ex-wife they've underestimated, to smile after a strike. That smile was the first fracture in the carefully controlled world they'd built around me. It was a warning, and it was also a beginning. They thought they knew me. They thought I'd stay quiet forever. They were wrong. My name is Nora Whitman, and what happened on Thanksgiving Day wasn't the start of the betrayal. It was its climax. The betrayal had come slowly, like a leaky pipe behind the walls, warping everything beneath the surface. But on that day, in front of my family, my smile cracked their entire foundation wide open. Let me tell you how it all began. For 35 years, Thanksgiving at my home on Jones Street in Savannah, Georgia, had been a tradition, the kind that made neighbors peek through lace curtains, marveling at the floral centerpieces, the scent of rosemary roasted turkey, and the soft jazz drifting through the windows. It was elegant, predictable, safe. And I was the woman who made it all happen. Not because I wanted to impress, but because for years, it was all I had. Richard and I bought the house in 1984, a white columned beauty draped in ivy, just a few blocks from Forsyth Park. He was climbing the biotech ladder, and I was freshly pregnant with our first child, Ethan. Back then, I believed in permanence. I believed in love as a reward for patience and sacrifice. But years chip away at belief, especially when you marry a man like Richard Whitman, charismatic, brilliant, controlling. He made me believe I was lucky to have him, even when he spent more time in conference rooms than at our dinner table. Even when our third child, Marcus, died in a hiking accident, and Richard only allowed himself a 5-minute silence before catching a flight to Singapore. Grief, to him, was inefficient. We divorced 7 years ago, or at least that's what the papers said. In truth, I remained tethered to the life we built together. The house, the routines, the traditions. I kept cooking the same meals, setting the same table, inviting the same children who had grown into distant versions of themselves. Ethan stayed in Savannah. He was 41 now. Handsome, ambitious. A mirror image of his father, right down to the way he paused before saying something manipulative. He'd married young, had a son, Luke, now 19. And somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a person. I became a backdrop, a convenience. Our second child, Chloe, moved to Portland to become an eco-entrepreneur, which was code for a struggling app designer with a vague vision and dwindling funds. She called occasionally, mostly when she needed something. We hadn't spoken in 6 months, and Marcus was the glue, the middle child, the one who saw through the games. When he died, it felt like the entire family forgot how to be a family. That Thursday morning, I was polishing my mother's silver in the dining room when my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Hey, Mom. Just confirming for tomorrow. Luke's bringing someone, his girlfriend, I think. And Dad's hoping to stop by early. There's something he needs you to sign, about the cabin." The spoon in my hand paused mid-buff. "The Asheville cabin?" I asked. "Yeah, that one. Just some legal stuff. Developers are involved now. Dad said it's a formality. You'll have the turkey in by 4, right?" I nodded, though he couldn't see it. Dinner's at 4, like always. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the silver serving tray. My hair had turned white, elegant in its way. But my eyes had hardened over the years. They held secrets now, regrets, and something new. resolve. That cabin was the last place I had memories of Marcus. He loved the mountains, the quiet, the cold mornings wrapped in quilts, sipping cocoa. Richard had barely stepped foot in it after we bought it 20 years ago. But now, suddenly, he wanted my signature. I knew what that meant. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened a locked drawer in my study and pulled out a worn leather file. It contained everything I'd been quietly collecting over the years. Documents Richard had signed without reading, tax filings I'd had re-examined, and a very specific deed that bore only one name. Mine. By the time dawn rose over the Spanish moss outside, I had decided something with finality. This Thanksgiving wouldn't be like the others. I would not be the quiet host. I would not be dismissed. And I would not sign away what little I had left. Thanksgiving morning bloomed cold and clear. Savannah rarely got crisp autumn air, but that day the breeze carried a bite. I opened the windows to let it in. There was something cleansing about the chill. By noon the house smelled of sage, butter, and brown sugar. I had prepared the dishes, the same way I always did. My mother's cornbread stuffing, glazed carrots with orange zest, bourbon pecan pie with just enough bite. Every detail was perfect. I laid out the name cards. Ethan and Melanie. Luke and his girlfriend Haley, Richard, and one for Chloe, even though I doubted she would come. And beside me, always, an empty seat for Marcus. At 2:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Richard standing on my porch, looking every bit the powerful executive in a tailored camel coat. His hair had gone fully gray but was impeccably styled. He smelled like bergamot and leather. Everything about him radiated control. "Nora," he said, smiling with the same charm he once used to make me fall in love. "You look lovely." "You're early," I replied, stepping aside. He walked in like he still owned the place. His eyes scanned the polished floors, the candlelit hallway, the sterling centerpiece on the table. For a second I thought I saw something like regret flicker across his face. Then it was gone. "I have the papers," he said, pulling an envelope from his briefcase. "Simple stuff. The developers need both signatures to finalize the deal." "What, developers?" I asked. He blinked, then smiled again. "You weren't told? It's a wellness complex, luxury retreat, yoga, meditation, high-end spas. It'll triple the property value. A great opportunity for everyone." Everyone. As if that included me. I glanced at the envelope. "We'll talk after dinner." He frowned slightly, but nodded. "Of course. Let's keep things pleasant." He meant, don't make a scene. Play the role. Be the woman I always was. But he didn't know I'd stopped being that woman. Not long after, the rest of the family arrived. Ethan and Melanie, glowing from their latest travel adventure. Luke and Haley, young, cautious, observant. And then, shockingly, Chloe, appearing at the doorway with a single suitcase and a guarded smile. "Hey, Mom, I thought I'd drop in." I hugged her, smelling unfamiliar perfume and something desperate in her expression. Dinner was almost ready. The candles were lit. The wine was poured. Everyone took their place. Richard lifted his glass. "To family," he said. The others repeated it in a chorus. I raised my own glass and smiled. But deep inside, a storm was gathering, and they didn't see it coming. If you're still here, this is only the beginning. Subscribe to this channel so we can bring you more stories that peel back the polished surface and reveal what's really underneath. Stories that remind us the quietest voices can hold the sharpest truths. Now, let me ask you something to test your instincts. If someone casually asks you to sign a simple document over a holiday dinner, what should you do? A. Trust them. If they're family, what could go wrong? B. Read every line, twice, and then wait 24 hours. Comment A or B below, and tell us why. We're watching your answers. The best ones might get featured in our next video. The house was glowing. That soft kind of light only late autumn brings, when the sun has started to dip, but hasn't yet surrendered to the cold. Golden light, stretched across the table, caught in the crystal stemware, and danced on the polished surface like it, too, was trying to impress. My hands had been trembling when I set the last place card. The table was perfect. Too perfect, really. A silent battleground draped in linen and polished silver. Everything shone, except the truth, which lay heavy beneath the platters and floral centerpieces. The turkey was resting, the gravy simmering on low. I'd timed it all, as I always had, down to the minute. Hosting was my instinct, the reflex, of someone who had been expected to hold everything together for decades. But today wasn't about food. It wasn't even about family. It was about control. And mine was coming back. Richard was already seated when I returned to the dining room, leafing through his phone like the head of state reviewing last-minute intelligence. Even on Thanksgiving, he couldn't surrender the performance of power. It clung to him. The tailored suit, the expensive watch, the measured words. His wine glass was already half full, poured without asking. That was always his way. Ethan and Melanie arrived first, followed by Luke and Haley. I greeted them at the door, noting Ethan's stiff smile and Melanie's distracted energy. Haley looked uncertain, clutching a small gift bag, some polite gesture for the hostess, no doubt arranged by Melanie. Luke, as usual, was glued to his phone. Then, unexpectedly, Chloe walked in. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her dark hair had been cut bluntly at her shoulders, her clothes loose and wrinkled. There was something fragile about her that hadn't been there before, like the edges of her confidence had frayed and no one had bothered to mend them. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Hope it's okay." "Always," I said, hugging her. Her body tensed slightly, but she didn't pull away. As the family settled into the living room, I stood back for a moment. I watched how they avoided eye contact with each other, how the small talk skimmed the surface like stones over water. It was all practiced, decades of learned politeness over real emotion. Then Richard stood, raising his glass like a conductor silencing an orchestra. "I want to take a moment," he said, "to thank Nora for yet another perfect Thanksgiving." Murmur of agreement, smiles, nods, a little forced. "And I want to offer a toast," he continued, his voice settling into the authoritative tone that used to fill boardrooms and investor meetings. "To family, to new beginnings, and to a future where we're all working together." I smiled thinly and raised my glass, but the wine tasted sour in my mouth. Dinner began, and I moved mechanically through the motions. Carving the turkey, passing. Dishes. Chloe complimented the mashed sweet potatoes. Melanie asked for the cranberry sauce recipe. Small gestures. Safe topics. Until Ethan, ever his father's son, cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, "we've got some exciting news to share." Melanie beamed beside him. "We're moving." I looked up. "Oh?" "Zurich," Ethan said. "Dad offered me a role at the European HQ for the new biotech arm. It's a big promotion, R&D lead, full relocation package." "Congratulations," I said evenly. "And what about Luke?" Luke shrugged. "Gap year. Dad lined up an internship for me. It'll look good on applications." Richard was positively glowing, his fork idle as he soaked in the admiration. "It's the right move," he said. "Global expansion needs leadership with vision, and Ethan's been groomed for this." I reached for the serving spoon again, but paused. "And what does that have to do with me?" Richard blinked. "Pardon?" "You said we're all working together. What part do I play in this expansion?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Well, the lake cabin. Dad offered me his half of the sale. It'll help with renovations and relocation. I placed the spoon down and folded my hands. His half? Yes, Ethan said, cautiously now. Once you sign the papers, of course. And you were going to use my half for what exactly? Silence fell like a dropped plate. Chloe spoke up. I've been working on a new round of funding. For the app, I thought, maybe I'd fund it, I said, finishing the sentence. It's not like that, Ethan interjected. We just figured that I wouldn't need it, I said softly. That at my age, I'd be content with whatever scraps you decided I should have. Mom, Chloe said, it's Thanksgiving. Can we not do this right now? When would be a better time? I asked. When the papers are signed? When you're sipping espresso in Zurich with my money? Richard's tone shifted. Nora, this is about smart financial planning. No, I said. It's about power. It's always been about power with you. The tension thickened. Even the air seemed to draw tighter around us. Haley looked down at her plate. Luke suddenly had nothing to say. You're being unreasonable, Richard said coldly. This deal benefits everyone. Except me, I replied. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. The word landed like a slap, and not for the first time. I'd been called that in arguments for years. Anytime I disagreed. Anytime I voiced pain. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. You're blowing this out of proportion. I looked at my son, the boy I once stayed up with all night when he had asthma, the boy who sobbed into my shoulder after his first heartbreak, and wondered when he had disappeared. When had he become this sharp-edged man with polished shoes and no memory? You made plans, I said. All of you. Without me. Richard was growing agitated. We didn't need to involve you in the details. The property's been idle for years. This just makes sense. What else makes sense? I asked. Taking the proceeds and dividing them like birthday cake? Giving a slice to every child, every startup, every tuition bill, except the woman who owns the oven? Nora, he began. No, I cut him off. You've done this for years, Richard. You and your sons and your spreadsheets. You talk in circles until I'm supposed to forget that I have rights, that I have a voice. Richard's voice dropped into that dangerous, too calm register. This is about our family. Your resistance hurts everyone. No. What hurts everyone is pretending I don't matter. Ethan stood. Jesus, Mom, not everything's about you. And in that moment, I knew. The betrayal wasn't the documents. It wasn't Zurich or the startup or the lies. It was that none of them saw me anymore. They saw a resource, a signature, a problem. And the worst part? They thought they were entitled to it all. The rest of the dinner passed in silence. Forks clinked. Glasses refilled themselves. Haley offered to help clear plates, her eyes scanning the room like she wanted to be anywhere else. As I stood in the kitchen alone, scrubbing a dish that had already been cleaned, I felt a stillness inside me. Not defeat, not anger, but a kind of awakening. They thought they'd won, that I'd sign the paper, that I'd say yes, that I'd serve the food, smile at the toast, and fade quietly back into the background. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I had spent months preparing for this very moment. That the truth I held wasn't just legal or financial. It was nuclear. And next time someone raised a glass to new beginnings, it would be me. On my terms. And no one at that table would ever forget it. There is a silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound. It's a stillness so thick, so sudden, it hangs in the air like fog. It smothers breath, freezes motion, and lingers long after the moment passes. That silence filled my dining room the instant Ethan's hand met my cheek. The sound of the slap had been sharp, violent, and disbelieving. But the silence that followed, that was the real wound. It was the sound of a boundary breaking, of a truth finally exposed, of a family realizing for the first time that the woman they had underestimated was no longer willing to be small. I didn't fall. I didn't scream. I didn't even raise a hand to my face. Instead, I smiled, and that smile was the beginning of the end. But before we get there, let me take you to the moment just before everything unraveled. Dinner was long since over. Plates had been cleared, dessert untouched, wine glasses refilled without care or measure. The air in the room was heavy. Too many words spoken, too many more held back. Richard sat at the far end of the table, swirling his Cabernet like it was currency. Ethan leaned on one elbow, restless and irritated. Chloe stared at her lap. Luke kept fidgeting with his phone, and Haley looked like she wanted to disappear. I stood, napkin folded neatly on my plate. "I suppose this is the time, isn't it?" I said. "The part where I'm handed papers and expected to quietly surrender what's mine." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Nora, let's not dramatize this. It's a simple signature. Formality." "A formality," I repeated, slowly. "To sign over my share of the only property I have left with memories that haven't been tainted by you." "I told you," Richard replied coolly. "The cabin has been sitting unused. It's dead weight. This is a smart investment move. For you. For everyone." I took a breath. Let it fill my lungs like armor. "You've spent your entire life managing people, Richard. You mistake control for care, strategy for love, and now you've raised a son who does the same." Ethan straightened. "Mom, no," I said. "Let me finish." I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time in what felt like years. "You used to come into my bed during thunderstorms. Do you remember that? You were 5. You said the lightning sounded like monsters breaking the sky. I held you until you fell asleep." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "And now you sit at my table, talk about my assets like they're your next investment round, and think I should be grateful for being included in the plan you already made without me." "We were trying to help," Chloe whispered. "No, you were trying to handle me. You wanted me to sign away the last thing that matters to me, the only place that still feels like home, so you can all go off and live lives funded by my silence." "You've been provided for," Richard said, his voice rising. "You got the house, the pension, the house I can barely afford to maintain, the pension you tried to reduce by contesting my teaching salary as supplementary income. And don't think I forgot about the offshore accounts." The table went still. "What are you talking about?" Ethan asked, voice tight. "I'm talking," I said, slowly pulling a folder from beneath the antique sideboard. "About the money your father hid during the divorce. The accounts registered, in the Caymans, the shell companies, the executive perks conveniently filed as business losses." "You don't know what you're talking about," Richard snapped. "I do," I said, and slid the folder across the table. He didn't touch it. Ethan did. He opened it. His eyes scanned page after page of financial records, wire transfers, and statements that didn't lie. His jaw tensed. "This is a violation," Richard hissed. "No, this is a consequence," I said, voice steady. "I spent years documenting everything, but I kept it quiet, for the sake of peace, for the illusion of family. But today, that illusion has shattered." Richard stood. "This is extortion. It's called truth." Ethan rose too, his face flushed, nostrils flared. He looked between me and his father, something boiling just beneath his surface. "You're trying to ruin him," he said, voice shaking. "No, Ethan," I said. "I'm trying to stop you from becoming him." And then it happened. His hand moved before his mind could catch up. A blur of motion. A sudden explosion of pain. The left side of my face erupted in heat. A metallic taste filled my mouth, and the world tilted slightly. I stumbled into the serving cart, china clattering to the floor, but I didn't fall. My fingers found the wall, and I straightened. Everyone was frozen. Haley gasped. Melanie whispered, "Oh my God." Chloe stood in horror, her hands trembling. Ethan's hand still hung in the air, as if he hadn't quite realized what he'd done. And I smiled. Not because I forgave him, but because I'd waited for this moment. For the mask to fall. For the boy I raised to finally see the man he'd become. "Thank you," I said softly. Ethan blinked. "You just lost the one thing he's been trying to get from me for years," I continued, looking at Richard. My silence. Richard stepped forward, expression hard and unreadable. "Ethan was right to put you in your place." The words hung like a stench. Haley stood up. "What did you just say?" Melanie tried to speak but couldn't find words. Chloe looked like she might throw up, and I laughed. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't wild. It was the sound of a woman who had finally been pushed too far and come out the other side. "My place?" I said, touching the bruised cheek. "Is this where you think I belong, Richard? On the floor, next to broken china, and swallowed pride?" "Don't be theatrical," he snapped. "No," I said. "I've given this family everything. I gave up law school for you. I raised 3 children, built a home, stitched holidays out of thin air while you traveled the world chasing ambition. And when I asked for fairness, you offered condescension. When I asked for respect, you gave me manipulation." I turned to Ethan, who had sunk into his chair, his hands in his lap. "I was there for every scraped knee, every fever, every late-night science project. And now you raise a hand to me?" "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Mom, no," I said, voice trembling but firm. "Not yet. Not until you understand what that slap cost you." I moved to the secretary desk in the corner and pulled out another folder. This one older, thicker. 3 years ago, I said, laying it on the table, your father signed over the lake house to me. Completely. Legally. Jonathan, his former assistant, arranged it. It was buried in a pile of documents. Richard didn't read it, as usual. Richard lunged for the papers. "This is fraud." "It's legal," I said. "There were witnesses, notaries, digital records. I had it verified last year by a second attorney. It's airtight." Ethan looked at his father. "Is it true?" Richard's silence was confirmation. Haley sat back in her chair, stunned. "I own the lake house," I continued. "Every inch of it. And I've already placed it, and every other asset I hold, into a trust you cannot touch." Chloe finally spoke. "You'd do that to us?" "I didn't do it to you," I said. "I did it for me." Richard was red with fury. "You think this makes you strong? This makes you petty, vindictive, unstable." I turned to him, eyes unflinching. "And that's why, starting tomorrow, a restraining order will be filed. And an SEC report will be delivered detailing your financial crimes. Your company's board will receive a copy. And I'll ensure the IRS is looped in too." He paled. "You wouldn't." "I already have." And with that, I picked up my napkin, dabbed my bloodied lip, and walked away from the table where everything had just ended. Behind me, no one moved. Because for the first time they weren't watching the mother. They were watching the reckoning. The night swallowed me whole. I walked out of my house into the biting Savannah air without a coat, a suitcase already waiting in the trunk, packed days earlier. My left cheek throbbed with a dull pulse, the imprint of Ethan's hand lingering beneath the skin like a brand. But I didn't touch it. I didn't let myself flinch. I let the cold wind kiss the bruised skin, the sting a quiet reminder that I was awake now. Fully, furiously awake. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I started the engine. Not when I drove past the gaslit porches and grand oaks of the historic district. I passed our old church, the bakery where I used to take the kids after school, the alley where Marcus once surprised me with a Mother's Day drawing taped to a lamppost. Ghosts of another life. A softer one. A silenced one. By the time I reached Atlanta, it was just past midnight. The law firm of Camille Brooks stood quiet but imposing at the corner of Peachtree and 11th. I parked in the lot out back, retrieved my suitcase and the leather file that now held the beating heart of my future. Camille was already waiting, dressed in navy slacks and a silk blouse despite the hour, her locks pulled into a tight bun. "Nora," she said, her voice low with concern. "Let's get you inside." The firm smelled like leather-bound books and high-stakes decisions. Camille led me to her office and locked the door behind us. "What happened?" she asked gently, eyes on the swelling darkening my face. "My son," I said flatly. "He hit me, in front of everyone." Camille didn't ask why. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached for her phone and instructed her assistant, on a holiday night, to bring ice and painkillers. Then she sat across from me and waited. "Need to finalize everything we discussed," I said. "Tonight. I want it done before sunrise." Camille nodded. "The trust documents are ready. Your assets. Lake house. Pension. Residuals. The remaining equity from your teaching contracts will all transfer into the Clark Legacy Trust. You'll be the trustee. Only you. No family member can contest it once signed." "And it protects me from any claims Richard tries to make?" I asked. "Completely. The house, the accounts. It'll all be shielded. And since we included the clause regarding physical duress, your medical condition tonight will help reinforce your state of mind and justification." I nodded. "Let's begin." We spent the next 2 hours going line by line. I didn't rush. I read every word, every stipulation. Years married to Richard had taught me to never sign anything I didn't understand. Camille had anticipated every possible loophole and closed it with surgical precision. When the last signature was made, I felt a strange sense of quiet. Not relief, not yet, but something like oxygen returning to a room after a long fire. "There's one more thing," Camille said, opening a separate file. "The SEC report." She slid it toward me. "It outlines Richard's offshore holdings, discrepancies in biotech trial data, and stock manipulations. If submitted, it would trigger a federal investigation. Do you want to file it tonight?" "Not yet," I said. "Let's give him one chance to meet my terms. If he refuses, we release it." Camille raised an eyebrow. "You're more generous than I would be." "It's not generosity," I said. "It's strategy. If he agrees, he admits guilt. If he resists, I bury him." At 3:12 a.m., the legal videographer arrived. Young, alert, and professionally distant. Camille helped me pin back my hair, exposing the bruise in full view. We began the video deposition. I recounted every detail of the dinner, every financial manipulation, every insult, every loss. I spoke clearly, calmly. I refused to be shaken. Not anymore. When it was over, Camille walked me to the parking lot. "Where will you go?" "I've booked a room at the Piedmont Inn under my maiden name. Richard wouldn't look for me in a mid-range hotel." She smiled. "Clever." "I'm not going home again," I said. "Not tonight. Not ever, if I can help it." Back in the hotel room, I ignored the 19 missed calls on my phone. Most were from Ethan and Chloe. 2 were from Melanie. One was from an unknown number. I had no interest in any of them, until a new message arrived. I know what he did. I want to help. Haley. I stared at it. A second message followed. This is Haley, Luke's girlfriend. Please, Mrs. Whitman. This isn't right, I responded. How did you get this number? She replied instantly. From Luke's phone. They're at your house. Richard is making calls. Something about commitment papers. I'm scared for you. Commitment papers. Of course. Richard's next move would be to question my sanity, have me declared mentally unstable, claim I'd become paranoid, erratic, a danger to myself or others. It was a textbook tactic for men like him. Men who used power to rewrite reality. Where are you now? I asked. Coffee shop on Peachtree, the one with the green awning. Send me a photo, I typed. Within moments, I received a picture of Haley sitting alone at a corner table. Through the window, I could see the storefronts behind her, confirming the location. Stay there. I'm coming. I changed quickly, tucking my hair beneath a wool cap and slipping into an old coat. Before I left, I took detailed photos of my bruises and sent them to Camille with a note. Going to meet Haley. Location confirmed. We'll check in 30 minutes. I had learned from the best. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. Most of the city was still asleep, drunk on turkey and tradition. Haley stood as I walked in, her eyes widening with concern. Mrs. Whitman, she said. I'm so sorry, I didn't know what to do. You did the right thing, I said, sitting across from her. Now tell me everything. She looked over her shoulder, lowered her voice. After you left, they started arguing. Ethan was freaking out. Chloe locked herself in the guest room. Richard made some phone calls, then said he was calling in favors. Something about Dr. Harper? He said you needed help, that you were hysterical, that he'd fix it. I closed my eyes. Gregory Harper was a psychiatrist I'd met once at a corporate event. He was on Richard's company payroll, had testified in several legal battles as an expert witness. They said they were going to have you picked up tomorrow morning, that it would be better if you were already in care before you could cause more damage. I opened my eyes. Did you record any of it? Haley bit her lip. Actually, yes. She pulled out her phone. I know it's a two-party consent state, but I was part of the conversation. She played the recording. Richard's voice came through clear as a blade. She's erratic. She's paranoid. We'll get her evaluated and committed before she does something irreversible. Another voice, Ethan's, responded, I don't know if this is right, Dad. She's dangerous, Ethan. To herself and to this family. I sent the audio to Camille immediately. Haley sat back. What are you going to do? I looked at her. The one person in that house who had seen me, not the version they all constructed. I'm going to make sure that when Richard tries to have me committed, he's the one who ends up answering questions. Under oath, in court. She smiled faintly. Good. You should go back, I told her. They'll get suspicious if you're gone too long. What about you? I'm going to disappear. Just long enough to make them wonder who's really in control. I left. Before sunrise. By the time I reached the lake house in Asheville, the sky was glowing faintly with pale lavender light. The road wound up through the mountains like a secret, the pines towering like sentinels on either side. Snow had begun to fall, soft and silent. I unlocked the door with a key I'd never placed on my main ring. The caretaker had turned on the heat days earlier. The rooms were warm, the shelves stocked, the linens fresh. It felt like stepping into a version of myself I had almost forgotten. quiet, untouchable, and free. I made tea. I took my painkillers. I changed into thick socks and a sweater, then settled into the old leather armchair by the stone fireplace. Outside, the forest wrapped itself in snow. Inside, I began to breathe again. Tomorrow, everything would change, and I would be ready. Morning came slowly through the frost-framed windows of the lake house, casting a quiet light on everything it touched. The snow had stopped sometime in the night, leaving behind a serene white stillness that blanketed the trees, the roof, the deck, the world. I sat by the fireplace wrapped in a wool shawl, a cup of black coffee in my hands, the burn on my lip dull now, fading like a bruise retreating into memory. My phone had begun buzzing before 7 a.m., lighting up with messages from Camille and then from an unknown number I now recognized as Haley's. She was breathless in her texts, urgent. Richard and Ethan were at my house, not just with Dr. Harper, but with 2 men, orderlies, she said they were called. They'd expected to find me alone, vulnerable, disoriented. What they found instead was a wall of legal resistance. Officers, attorneys, and the solid weight of the law. At 9:15 a.m., Camille called. "It's done," she said without pleasantries. They were served with restraining orders. The video testimony was presented. Your medical report is on file. The trust is fully executed and active. And the whistleblower. Package was delivered to all board members at 9:01 a.m. sharp. What was the reaction? I asked quietly. Richard lost it, she said. Threats, demands, insults, classic corporate meltdown. Ethan went pale. Dr. Harper tried to backpedal the whole evaluation plan. The officers made a record of it all. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the words sink in. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. Anything else? I asked. Yes, Camille said, her tone heavier now. You're getting a call in about 5 minutes from the chairman of the board, John Hartwell. He wants to speak with you personally. Sure enough, my phone rang moments later. Elise, he said, still using my married name, though I hadn't heard it spoken aloud in a year. I received your documentation. It's extensive. It's truthful, I replied. I didn't say it wasn't. But you understand the nature of these accusations. Stock manipulation, false earnings reports, hidden assets. These are serious. I know. He paused. Why now? Because I gave Richard a chance, I said. I gave him every chance to walk away with dignity, to make this right. But instead, he tried to institutionalize me to silence me. He didn't leave me any other choice. Do you want to destroy him? I want accountability. That's not destruction. It's justice. Another pause. You realize if we push him out, it'll trigger an SEC investigation. The entire company could be at risk. Then maybe you should have asked better questions when he pitched you lies, I said. He sighed. You'll have his resignation by noon. Make sure the language includes financial misconduct and breach of ethics. You really don't. Want to negotiate, do you? I've spent my entire life negotiating. Now I'm making decisions. When the call ended, I placed the phone on the coffee table and stared at the dancing flames for a long while. The quiet felt earned now, like peace finally had a place to land inside me. By 2 p.m., the news had broken. Richard Whitman, biotech executive, had stepped down amid mounting allegations of financial impropriety. His resignation letter, a masterclass in corporate doublespeak, cited personal challenges and a desire to prioritize family and wellness. No mention of the SEC, the hidden accounts, or the attempt to institutionalize the mother of his children. I received 57 missed calls that day. I answered none of them. Ethan's voicemail came first. Mom, please. I don't know what's happening. There are police here, lawyers. Camille Brooks is here. Dad's losing it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. What happened on Thanksgiving, I don't know what came over me. Please call me back. Then Chloe. Mom, this is insane. Whatever Dad did, that's between you two. Why are you dragging all of us into this? Do you really think this is what Marcus would have wanted? I deleted them both. That night, I lit a fire in the hearth and pulled out the final folder I had brought with me, the one I had never opened, not since the day it arrived in the mail, a week after Marcus died. It was his last letter, mailed from Colorado, where he'd been working as a wilderness guide for teens with trauma. The handwriting was messy, the envelope weathered. Mom, I don't know what the future holds. I don't even know why I'm writing this, except that I've been thinking about you lately, about all the things you never say out loud. I see how Dad talks over you, how the others pretend you're just there to keep things going. But I see you, the way you listen, the way you remember, the way you hold it all together while everyone else pretends it's easy. You always say strength is quiet. But I think sometimes it doesn't have to be. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is make noise, stand your ground, take up space. I hope someday you do that. I hope you let yourself be as big and powerful as I know you are. Love always, Marcus. I read the letter twice. The second time, I wept. 6 months later, I was living full-time in the lake house. I'd sold the house in Savannah, donated nearly everything inside it, and changed my phone number. The trust was untouchable. Richard's legal attempts to challenge, it had failed spectacularly. The SEC investigation had not just cost him his board seat, it had sparked 2 class action lawsuits. His name was now synonymous with scandal, and his legacy was unraveling in courtrooms and headlines. Ethan sent letters. At first, they were full of excuses, then guilt, then pleas. I read the first few. After that, I stopped opening them. Chloe alternated between furious voicemails and guilt-laced texts. I blocked her number. Only one person from that table ever came to the lake house again. Luke. He arrived one afternoon in early spring, stepping onto the porch with Haley beside him. They carried a basket of groceries and a letter of apology handwritten in blue ink. He said he no longer spoke to his father, that he had started therapy, that Haley had shown him the recording, played it for his ethics professor at school, and it had opened something he hadn't known how to face. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for understanding. I gave him both. They visit now and then. They bring flowers, firewood, books they think I'd like. They never stay long, but they never take me for granted. One day, Luke asked, "Don't you ever miss them? Don't you ever think about forgiving them?" I looked out at the lake where I had taught Ethan to swim, where Chloe used to catch frogs in her bare hands, where Marcus had once carved his name into a tree. The memories were still here, but they no longer owned me. "No," I said softly. "Some things can't be forgiven." And I meant it, not because I hadn't loved them, but because love without respect is not love. It's servitude. And I had done my time. Now I was free. The lake belonged to me. The silence belonged to me. The story finally belonged to me, and I was done giving it away. In a world where so many women are taught to keep the peace, Nora Whitman taught us what happens when one woman decides to keep herself instead. Her story began, like so many others, with compromise, with silence, with choosing family over self again and again, until there was nothing left to give that hadn't already been taken. She was a mother, a wife, a woman who built her life around tradition, around love, around the belief that if she held her family together tightly enough, maybe they wouldn't unravel, but they did. Her husband, Richard, a man whose charm masked a deep need for control, betrayed her not just with infidelity, but with financial deception, manipulation, and ultimately, with the attempted erasure of her autonomy. Her son, Ethan, once her little boy who needed comforting during storms, grew into a man who could raise his hand to her. Her daughter Chloe disappeared until there was something to gain. The family she had poured her life into looked her in the eye and asked her to give more, to sign away the last meaningful piece of her life, without hesitation, without shame. And for a long time, Nora had. She had hesitated. She had stayed quiet. She had endured. Until one Thanksgiving. That day, Nora didn't just set a table. She set a boundary. And when it was crossed, when Ethan slapped her, and Richard dared to justify it, she stood in that space between betrayal and awakening, and she made a choice. Not to break, but to rise. Her smile in that moment wasn't madness. It was clarity. It was the soundless click of decades of chains unlocking all at once. What followed was not revenge. It was reclamation. With the help of Camille, a trusted ally and brilliant attorney, Nora took back what was hers. She secured her finances, protected her home, exposed Richard's crimes, and dismantled the image of the powerless ex-wife her family had crafted for her. She faced humiliation, isolation, and deep grief, not just over the betrayal, but over the decades she had lost trying to be everything for everyone. And yet, she emerged not bitter, but clear, focused, resolved. She didn't need applause. She didn't need validation. She needed only one thing: the space to live as her fullest self, unedited, unowned. Nora's decision to live at the lake house wasn't just about changing addresses. It was about reclaiming identity. It was where she had laughed with her children, mourned her son Marcus, and rediscovered the woman she had been before the silencing. It became her sanctuary, not because it was quiet, but because it no longer demanded her silence. Over time, only one branch of the family tree reached back toward her, Luke, her grandson. Through him, and through Haley, she saw that even in broken legacies, new growth can still emerge. They brought her nothing but honesty. No requests, no conditions. And in that, Nora found healing. Not a return to the past, but a step toward a future she authored herself. The lesson Nora teaches us is this: sometimes the greatest act of love is to stop sacrificing yourself for people who only know how to take. That strength isn't just in enduring pain, but in walking away from it. That silence, when weaponized against you, must be broken. And that you are never too old, too forgotten, or too far gone to start again. So how do we apply this? Ask yourself, where in your life have you made yourself small for the comfort of others? Where have you mistaken survival for peace? You may not own a lake house. You may not be facing a legal battle. But you might be facing a different kind of erasure at work, in your relationships, even within yourself. Start small. Say no when you mean it. Say yes to yourself. Document your value. Honor your history. And if no one stands beside you when you finally draw that boundary, stand anyway. The ground beneath you will remember, and eventually, so will you. Nora's story is not a fantasy. It's a roadmap, a cautionary tale, and, more than anything, a quiet revolution. Now let me ask you something. If someone you love demands you give up something sacred to you for the good of the family, what should you do? A. Agree for the sake of harmony, even if it hurts. B. Protect what's sacred, even if it means conflict. Comment A or B below, and tell us why. Your perspective might help someone else find clarity in their own situation. What about you? Have you ever had a Nora moment? A time you finally stood up and took your power back? What was it like? Share your story in the comments so others can draw strength from your courage. And if Nora's journey moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on your own life, please subscribe to this channel. Your support gives us the strength to keep telling stories that matter, stories that shake something loose, stories that remind us who we are. We're just getting started.